All right. Good morning, Cynthia and Elyse. Thank you so much for joining me. For those of you listening, this is going to be truly an incredible episode. I can tell already. Before we jump into anything, Cynthia, could you go ahead and introduce yourself to us, and then Elyse, you as well?
Hi, everybody. My name is Cynthia Barnes. I am the founder and CEO of the National Association of Women Sales Professionals. We are a member-based organization of women who sell B2B services in male-dominated industries. And our focus is helping women in sales get to the top 1% by equipping them with the network and the training provided by women for women to achieve that goal.
I so love that work, Cynthia. It's such a big just fan of what you've done and supporter of what you've done. And hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Elyse Archer. I'm a founding team member of a company called Brand Builders Group. We are a personal brand strategy firm for mission-driven messengers who are passionate about growing their personal brand and figuring out how to monetize their message. And then I also do what I call video confidence and lead generation coaching, working with professionals who want to grow their confidence on camera and figure out how to use video to generate more consistent inbound leads for their business. I'm super excited for this conversation today.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
So what we're going to be focusing on today is really the barriers and the struggles that women in particular go through when using video, either for personal communication, in live communication like Zoom, or even in building a personal brand on social media or YouTube, etc. Obviously these topics will apply to some extent to all human beings, male and female, but in particular, we're going to be focusing on things that tend to be most strongly experienced by women getting started in the world of video. So for this interview, I'm mostly going to stay in the background, maybe once in a while, ask a little question here or there, but most of the time let Cynthia and Elyse have this conversation because they both have a ton of experience working with professionals, working with women in particular, in Elyse's case, working with people on, getting comfortable on camera. So I think it's going to be an awesome conversation. So Cynthia, why don't you go ahead and kick us off with a question for Elyse?
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Elyse, why do you think so many women struggle with feeling like they have nothing interesting to say in video content?
It's a really, really interesting question, Cynthia. I think it's interesting too, because I hear this a lot from female clients. And to me, I think it's a couple of things. One is, on a personal note, I can relate to insecurities growing up, feeling like, do I have something relevant to say in the classroom? Or do I have something relevant to say even in the workplace, right? And I feel like you probably see this a lot in your work with women who struggle with speaking up in meetings sometimes as much as they hear their male counterparts doing it. And I think it's kind of ingrained where we question ourselves and we question the worth of what we have to say. And then that translates to video. I always say video is just a magnifier. So if there's any sort of insecurity that's showing up for you when it comes time to go live or go on camera, it's actually, I try to look at it as a gift, because that is an indication of this is an insecurity that's holding you back in other parts of your life as well. So I wonder if you can relate to that. And I know you see a lot of women who maybe struggle with speaking up in meetings. And I'd actually be curious to get your perspective on that too. Do you think it's related to the insecurities that we sometimes feel, in the workplace, or even just kind of how women are conditioned that their voice may not be as important or their message may not be as important as their male counterparts? Or do you see something else going on there?
I see a lot of inner critic speak. And sometimes that inner critic will tell us, you're not good enough, you're not young enough, you're not old enough, you're not this, you're not that. Basically, it boils down to you're not enough of something. So when women think about creating content, that inner critic is telling them, well, like you said, you don't have anything relevant to say, either because of self-limiting beliefs or a number of people have shot down their ideas, and it's been ingrained that what you have to say is not nearly as important as somebody else.
Yes, yes. Well, and I love that you brought up too the whole concept of not enough, because this is something that I've been so present to lately. And I've even noticed showing up in my own life as I grow my brand and have pivoted my own brand and career, this kind of underlying theme of, is what I have to say important enough? And it really comes down to, am I enough? And I think for a lot of us, male and female, that's one of the core challenges that we struggle with throughout our life, is this feeling of not enoughness.
Yes.
And one of the things that I always remind my clients, and I have to remind myself too, is, I look at the people who I follow online and people who have made a big impact and a big difference in my life. And I think every single person struggles with this at some point. It's part of just the human condition. But I think about, what if they had felt like they weren't enough? Or what if they had felt like their message had already been shared? Sometimes I'll use the example, because I know a lot of women love following Rachel Hollis. Well, what if she had looked at who was already out there in the personal development world and say, well, Tony Robbins has said it all already. What am I going to add to this conversation? Well, how many women's lives have been impacted because she decided that even if what she had to say had maybe been said in another way by somebody else, what would it look like if she hadn't decided to speak up and she hadn't decided to put herself out there? And so I think what we have to remember is, whether you are in a sales role and you're trying to speak to a customer who needs to hear your message, or maybe you're building your personal brand and you want to create something more in the personal development space or in the health and wellness space, there is somebody out there who needs to hear it from you specifically. And so one of my colleagues, Rory, says, your calling is somebody else's signal. And I always try to remember that if you feel called to be more visible on video, it is because somebody out there needs to hear it from you specifically. And I'd love to hear this from you too, and kind of hear your perspective on this, because I think you have done such a brilliant job of building your brand in this space, in a space that really needs more female leaders. And it's taken, I'm sure, quite a degree of boldness and courage to really step out of your comfort zone in doing that. How do you view boldness? Do you view boldness as it being innate, where you've either got it or you don't, or is it something that you can grow and facilitate over time? How have you seen that play out in your life?
I think it's more of a habit. It's a mindset that develops because of the daily habits. And I think that when you do something over and over and over again, it becomes that habit and you begin to believe it. It's almost like Amy Cuddy says, fake it until you become it type of thing. So I would encourage women out there, for those that have hangups about video or about presenting themselves, first of all, get an index card and write an affirmation that says, I am enough without even trying. And repeat it to yourself 100 times a day to combat all of those negative thoughts. And then the next thing I would say is, if you have hangups around anything, especially around branding yourself and projecting your message, ask yourself, why not me?
Brilliant. That's so
why
good.
not me?
I love that affirmation too, about I am enough without even trying. That's so good, because I've been reworking my affirmations recently, and that was a limiting belief I noticed was coming up for me as I'm going to a new financial level and going to new levels in my business, was that I have to be perfect in order to achieve a certain type of result. And I think so many women, I mean, I'm guessing here, but from the conversations I've had with a lot of women, there's a degree of perfectionism that shows up, where if I'm not perfect, this isn't going to happen, or I'm not going to hit this goal, or I'm not going to achieve this outcome. And I see that show up and limit a lot of women from being more visible and from putting themselves out there as well. One other question I would have for you, because I think you and I we're going to have similar experiences, and then we're also going to have different experiences as well, just because of our backgrounds. There's a number of women of color in my coaching program, and I always notice it's like they're having a different experience than I am when it comes to being more visible, putting themselves out there. From your perspective, why do you think more women of color aren't necessarily putting themselves out there on video or building their brand on LinkedIn? Do you see anything specific happening for women of color in this field?
While I can't speak to all women of color, for all women of color, I can go based upon what I see. And while the numbers are not staggering, there are women of color out there building their brands. We just have to be intentional about seeking them out. I think that there's also a stigma around women of color or minorities being visible. And again, that goes back to those self-limiting beliefs because we tend to compare ourselves to others. Am I bold as this person? Do people want to hear what I have to say like this person? And when you compare yourself to other people, you can only be as good as that other person. So I would encourage women of color to be vocal and to stand up and say what they have to say, even if it's been heard before, but it hasn't been heard from you. So I'd like to know from your point of view, when you're dealing with those women of color in your group, what hangups do you see, Elyse?
Sure. Good question. I think it's going to be similar hangups to what I see with women across the board, but certainly coming from different background and experience. I think some of the biggest hangups that we face as women specifically with video content is insecurity around the way we look, around the way we sound, around kind of like we already talked about our messaging. Do I have something worthwhile to say? Do I have something that other people are going to want to hear? Another thing that I hear too is it's fear of judgment. It's fear of criticism. And I think that's the underlying insecurity that shows up is I'm going to put myself out there and I'm going to have somebody leave a nasty comment.
Yes.
I'm going to have somebody say something disparaging. I'm going to have somebody put me down. And the thing that I always tell them, and that's really been so true in my own life, is I've never been publicly criticized by somebody more successful than me. I have yet to be publicly criticized by someone more successful than me, right? And if you think about it, the haters, the people who are leaving the negative comments,
the trolls.
Yes, the trolls. It's like they have nothing better to do.
Nothing.
When I look at my mentors, the people who I pay to coach me, the people who are farther along than I am and are where I want to be, they would never leave a nasty judgmental comment on my content. They may pull me aside separately and say, hey, I noticed that this happened in the last piece of content you did, and here's something you can do to improve. They're never going to leave that nasty comment. It's kind of like Brene Brown talks about the people who are in the arena with you. Those are the people whose opinions matter. Those are the people who I want to listen to, but they're never going to be the ones to leave the nasty comments. So I want to hear your perspective on this. To me, if I'm not getting critical comments, if I'm not getting the trolls and the haters, I haven't put myself out there enough. And so to me, it's always like a benchmark of when I get a hater, when I get a critical comment, it's like, yes, I've grown to a level where people are noticing my stuff that I don't know. And for those people, I simply have a level of empathy for them that how bad must your life be right now that you would take the time to leave a gross comment or a nasty comment on my stuff. So what do you think about that? What's your opinion on that?
I used to be so afraid of what people thought and what they were going to say. And it's almost like I was future tripping on the what if. And I was saying, okay, well, if they do this, then I'll react like this. But the reality of it is, like you said, if you don't make the video, you don't put yourself out there, then you don't subject yourself to criticism, sure, but you also don't have any impact. And the likelihood of you getting one or two comments that are negative does not outweigh the positive impact that you have. And always, always remember that you can't make a judgment or make a decision based upon one or two data points. That just doesn't make any good sense. So I did a series of videos and I thought I looked great. I had on this really nice blouse and a brooch that my mother had given me 20 years ago. And one of my colleagues tore me apart. And I thought, I was so when I thought of the video and how I looked, I was pleased. When they looked at it, they were displeased, but nobody else had any negative comments to say. And I made a choice not to listen to that colleague that with the negative comments because it was only one data point. It was only one person's opinion. And number two, they didn't offer any advice on how to improve. They just tore it down. So you've got to be careful about who you listen to. And if people are not trying to uplift you and offer constructive feedback, then you make a choice as to whether or not their words carry any weight in your world.
Yes. And here's the thing too, that comment, it was not about you. It was about them. It was about something that was going on in their world at that point. And I think that's the thing we have to always remember, is that really for other people, whether it's a positive comment or a negative comment, it's Julie Solomon, who hosts the Influencer podcast, says, if you spot it, you've got it. So if somebody calls out and does like a negative comment or tears down the way that you look, it's really just them having a moment about not liking the way they look, not liking something about themselves, and they're actually just seeing you as a mirror or a reflection of that and taking it out on you. It's not a mature way to do it. It's not the right way to do it. But I think one of the best lessons, and I've actually got this up on my vision board right now because I've needed this reminder lately, is what other people think of me is none of my business. And it's so important. And it can be hard, right? Like I have to remind myself of this all the time, every single day, that, the more you put yourself out there, you are going to have people who criticize and who leave negative comments. And it's really not my business at the end of the day either, because I think our greatest failure it's not putting ourselves out there and getting a negative comment. It's not doing it, right? Our greatest failure is our own self-betrayal. That's the only way you can do this wrong, is if you're feeling called to put yourself out there and you don't do it because it's more comfortable to stay where you are.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, I think, go ahead.
I have a question for you. So a lot of the members that I speak to worry about body image. And for women especially, we grow up, we're looking at magazines and airbrushed bodies and perfect lips and hips and eyes and nose and everything. And we are taught from a very young age as girls to compare ourselves to what society deems beautiful. So how can women get over that body image or negative body image when it comes to getting on camera? Because I hear them say, well, I'm too big for camera. Camera adds 10 pounds. My nose isn't right. Just stuff, but it's real. So what advice do you have?
It's so real. It's so real. And this has been like my personal biggest struggle for so much of my life. When I was in my teens and 20s, I struggled with a really bad eating disorder. I battled anorexia and then binge eating for 17 years. And that was a big piece of my history and who I am. So you can imagine going into a profession or going into a position where you're going to be more visible. All of that stuff can come back up.
Yes.
And it's been a journey. I don't know if there's I don't think there's a magic bullet here. For me, it's really been a journey of understanding why I struggled with those things in the first place. And it's going to be more extreme issues for some women, and it's going to be less extreme issues for other women. Everybody's on kind of a range and a continuum. But for me, it was really what I realized was that a lot of those insecurities, a lot of those hangups came from childhood stuff, came from trying to fix things in my household that I couldn't fix and feeling responsible and taking them on. And so there's, I would say specifically for any women who struggle with insecurities that are tied to body image and there's any sort of eating disorder component, wonderful book, Eating by the Light of the Moon, really helped me unlock a lot of my own personal reasons for why I was doing things and understand myself better. But I think regardless of whether it's an eating disorder related thing or just insecurities, like general insecurities, you're right. What we see as being worthy of being visible in the media is so different from how most of us are. Mm-hmm. And, I heard this recently, and this it shocked me and it didn't shock me, that a lot of women right now are going to plastic surgeons asking for the Instagram filter makeover. What? Which is, this is a thing. This is going on where we see ourselves a certain way with the filter on Instagram, and that becomes what we like. And they want to look like that in real life. And it's challenging too, because for me, when I put on that filter, I'm like, oh, I do look good. Like I don't have any skin imperfections. I'm like the lashes. I can instantly have makeup, right? And so there is an element of instant gratification, and we learn it's easy, I think, to like the way you look better. Mm-hmm. In that scenario. So one of the things, like I said, there's no magic bullet. And I feel like I'm going a little bit all over the place here because there's just so many elements to this. One of the things I think is putting yourself out there more as you are, mm-hmm. and noticing that it's okay. It's okay. When I had surgery recently. I've talked about this a little bit in my videos. I had skin cancer that developed right up here, and I got surgery for it. It was low-grade skin cancer. A lot of people deal with it, but I've got this scar now that's, it's covered with makeup pretty well right now, but it's like a scar that's right here. And I struggled with a lot of insecurity and fear of putting myself out there after getting that. And I told myself, like, I just have to do it. I just have to like show it to the world and realize that I'm going to be okay. So I did a video with this massive bandage on my head and no makeup and just like covering it up. And what I actually found was that was one of my most popular videos, because people were like, thank you for just being real. Like, thank you for just showing yourself as you are. And that was honestly, that was a scary thing for me to do, because we do get caught up in, I need to look this certain way in order to keep my public image at whatever level. So I think part of it is putting yourself out there in a more vulnerable, it doesn't have to be no makeup, it doesn't have to be completely raw, but try things that make you feel a little bit vulnerable and notice that you're okay. Notice that you're okay with it. And then I think the second thing is really just my own personal practice of deepening my self-worth. For me, part of it is my spiritual practice of every morning, just praying, journaling. If I'm noticing a limiting belief showing up about how I look or my body image, I'll journal about it and I'll look at what's the belief that's showing up right now. And then I'll create a new affirmation that's the opposite, that I'm like, okay, this is the limiting belief. It's time for me to, like, this is a gift. It's holding me back in my life. My subconscious has made me aware of it. So what would a more empowering belief be that would support me in achieving my goals? So that's, like, I could talk about this forever because it's been a big, a big thing for me. But do you have any other tips, or do you anything else that you see for the women you work with who struggle with body image issues?
Again, it goes back to what you said of having those positive affirmations. Mine is, I am enough without even trying. And I'm a woman of faith, and whether you call it God, or you call it Allah, you call it the universe, if the universe, and we'll say just the universe, comes and taps on your shoulder and whispers in your ear and says, I want you to do this, then know that the universe will give you everything that you need to be able to make it come to fruition. Right? Yeah. So the universe will open the doors, give you the confidence. You just have to act. And boldness comes from a habit. When you first learned to ride a bike, you were scared to death. You fell down, you skinned your knee, you may even bumped your head, but it didn't stop you from getting back up on that bike. And just like a baby who's learning to walk, falls down a whole bunch of times, they get back up and they didn't say to themselves, well, I'm going to stop walking because I fell down a couple of times. Feel the fear and do it anyway. And the more you do it, the bolder you will become. It's a proven fact. Just do it over and over and over. So I don't care if it's a 30-day challenge or you want to do one video a week. Challenge yourself to say, I'm going to feel the fear and do it anyway, because the world needs to hear what I have to say. And say that enough to yourself until you believe it.
Oh my gosh. Yes. That's it. And you realize once you do it, like, I remember before my first live video, I was so scared. I had this really special hang up just for a live video. I could do pre-recorded because if I didn't like how it went, I could scrap it and nobody had to see it. But live video for some reason just freaked me out. And I remember I was sweating. I was so nervous. And at the end of the day, it comes down to really selfishness, because we're so consumed with thinking about ourselves and focusing on ourselves that we kind of forget the real purpose of why we're doing something. But to your point, doing it and realizing that you're okay. The world's not going to end. Things are going to be fine. People are actually probably going to respond favorably. Yeah. And especially at the beginning, when you're just starting out, you don't really have an audience anyway. For most of us, when you're first starting out, it's maybe your mom watching, right? Like, that's it. So it's low stakes. It's low stakes, I think, at the beginning as well, which helps. So.
I think that we reflect on the celebrities or the people in our lives that we hold near and dear to our heart, or whose word we hang on. One of those people for me, is Oprah. And because she was so transparent with her weight issues, she drew me in because I could relate to the struggle and the challenge and the frustration of having a weight issue. So when she came out on stage back in the late 80s with that wagon full of 67 pounds of fat, and she had on these skinny jeans, I thought, I am so proud of her. And then she fell off the wagon and she talked about those struggles too. And I thought, I'm still proud of her for letting us into her world when she didn't have to. And because of that vulnerability and her opening up her life and her world and her emotions and her mind to us, we love her. I bet if she ran for president, she would probably get as many votes as the next person because we love her. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Don't be afraid of vulnerability because people want to know you, and you get to judge how much you let people into your world, but do it. Do it. Yes. Because the world wants to know you because you're spectacular.
Yeah. I think it's so true. And people, we don't trust perfect. You know, we may think it's pretty. We may want to flip through it in a magazine. We may want to scroll through it on an Instagram feed, but at the end of the day, it just makes us feel worse about ourselves.
It does.
and so I think that I love the example of Oprah. She's on my vision board too right now. It's just a mentor and somebody I really want to emulate. And, you know, when we can see ourselves in someone else, that's what creates that bond. And so I love the point you make of not needing to feel perfect, not needing to be perfect in order to show up, and sharing some of the messy stuff. You know, for years, I was so scared to share about the eating disorder because I felt I still had so much judgment on myself for it. And I think as I've put it out there in the world, I've had so many women say, I struggled with that too. I relate to that. And I actually have women come to me now and want to work with me as clients because they're like, you get me, you understand it.
Yeah.
And for each of us, our own personal struggles, I think we're given them because we're meant to help other people figure out how to work through it, how to accomplish their goals with those struggles. So absolutely. You know, one final thing that I think would be useful for us to talk about, and I'll maybe share a thought, and I want to hear your thoughts on this too. You know, we've talked about it a little bit, is getting the focus off of yourself and onto other people. Which is really, to me, the key to all of this and the key to being more confident on camera, because we can't physically feel fear and be thinking about helping somebody else. If you try it, you know, if you like, and this is something I always recommend for my clients and my network too, is when you feel that insecurity or that fear welling up when it's time to record, time to go live, that's just an indication that you're thinking about yourself. So it's like, okay, I'm glad I've got the awareness. And how can you shift into thinking about serving or helping somebody else? And just one of my tips, and then I'd like to hear yours. One of my tips is just thinking about who your favorite client is, and really thinking about, if I was sitting across the table having coffee with this person right now and they were struggling with the issue I'm about to talk about, how would I feel as I talk to them? And what would the conversation be like? And it probably wouldn't be focused on you. It'd probably be focused on them, but just literally imagining that they're right there next to you. And maybe you've got a picture of them that's behind the camera that you're kind of glancing at while you talk. But to me, that always helps. Do you have any other tips or advice for women who are really wanting to learn how to shift the focus off of themselves onto service as they put themselves out there and become more visible?
Those are excellent points. And I would say, in addition to that, we are so egocentric. We're always focused on my looks, my message, my this, my that. If we were to go from being egocentric to customer-centric and focus on what does my audience need to hear to achieve the goal that I want them to achieve. So whoever you are, you've got to think about, what is my goal for my audience, and speak to that. That's the only way it works. If you focus on self, then you'll never get anywhere, but you've got to focus on, what does my audience need to hear to achieve the goal that I want them to achieve. So for NAWSP, I want to focus on helping our members get to the top 1%. So all of my messaging is around helping that woman get to the top 1%, whatever that looks like for her. When I'm focused on someone else, it's hard to focus on my own insecurities. Mm. And the true test of whether or not we are successful in life is not based upon how much we achieve. It's truly based on how many others we help achieve their greatness.
Mm. I love that. Yeah, I love that. I think at the end of the day, if we can remember, we're all kind of one, like we're all trying to figure out the same thing. We're all going after the same, the same type of growth and expansion. And the more we can remember when somebody else succeeds, I succeed, yes, then it's a lot more fun. So yeah, I love this conversation. Jonathan, I'll turn it back to you. But this has been so fun and so awesome to get to have this conversation.
Definitely value added. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for doing this. For all you guys listening to this, you could go back and listen to like a dozen previous episodes, and you probably wouldn't find an episode as good as this one. And there's a lesson in that for us guys. Find brilliant women to work with. Shut the hell up and let them do their thing. I was literally on mute the entire time. I just kind of sat here and observed. It was awesome. So low pressure, so relaxing. I didn't have to worry about where the conversation was going. You guys did beautiful with it. So yes, thank you a ton for that. I can guarantee you people listening to this are going to have loved it and are going to want more, right? They're going to want to connect with you, Cynthia, to learn about the National Association of Women Sales Professionals, said it right, and you, Elyse, to talk to you about, your personal branding business and even Magnetic, the video conference program you have. So what is the best way for people to get in contact with each of you? And is there any particular projects you got working on, right, or you're working on right now, people should check out?
Sure. Go ahead, Elyse.
Sure thing. So I am at Elyse Archer on all social. My website is elysearcher.com. And one free gift that I would love to offer the audience, I actually have an ebook that I wrote about video confidence and lead generation for entrepreneurs. And this is going to apply whether you're in sales, whether you're an entrepreneur, but you can get that for free at elysearcher.com/entrepreneur ebook. And it'll just teach you the best tips, strategies, tools that I teach my coaching clients on how to grow their confidence on camera and then how to use video to grow their business as well. So I would love to offer that to your listeners. And again, that's elysearcher.com/entrepreneur ebook.
Fantastic. I'm going to pick up a copy. Thank you so much for arranging this. Elyse, it's been a pleasure getting reacquainted. I love the fact that our paths have crossed again. I watched your videos and learned so much, and you've helped me become more vocal on video. So I thank you for that. For those who are listening, I invite you to check out NAWSP at nawsp.org. You can always follow me, Cynthia Barnes, on LinkedIn. And last but not least, we have an online community for women sales professionals and female entrepreneurs at the NAWSP Tribe. It's like a Facebook group on steroids. So check out www.nawsptribe.com, and I'll see you on the inside. You'll at least know one person going in there.
All right. Well, thank you so much for this interview, guys. It's been awesome.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.